Going to record so that we can have this for posterity. And I think that's all the housekeeping notes. I'm ready to get to the good part, which is our speaker for today. Everybody out there in Zoom, can you hear okay? You're saying yes. Very good. Thank you. Okay, so our speaker is Listening Laura. I love alliteration, so she got 10 points right off the bat from me for calling herself Listening Laura. And Laura Janusik is a PhD in communications with a specialty in listening. I don't think I knew you could specialize in listening before meeting you, Laura. And so she's going to talk today about the top 3 tips for communicating with your loved one who is experiencing a cognitive change. And I know this is a topic that is just always on time, no matter what. We can always use enhanced communication. I won't steal your thunder, Laura. I want you to tell us why. But Laura is an expert, and that's what we like to have on our weekly webinar. We like to have people who know what they are talking about. Laura also has a master's degree, an MBA, right? And I just learned a few moments ago that she got that degree from the University of Maryland.
That was my PhD.
She got the PhD, excuse me. Get it right, Kelly. Yes. So yeah, professor, an expert, a lovely person. So with that, I'll turn it over to you, Laura, to give us the communications tips. And you should be able to use your clicker to move back and forth. But you can't until I put the slides up. That's what you're trying to very kindly tell me. So hang on. Let me get Laura's slides up. And then we will be officially on the way. Okay, Laura and I did not talk about this beautiful slide background with the rainbow colors, but you know I love it. You know I do. Okay, I think you're good to go now. I'm gonna go sit over there and I'll be watching the chat. I'll let you know. Okay, thanks everybody.
Thanks so much, Kelly. I'm so happy to be here and welcome to the club you never wanted to. Right? So most of you know what I'm talking about. When we're little children, what do you want to be when you grow up? I've never heard anybody say caregiver or somebody in my.
Yeah, sorry to interrupt. I'm getting no.
Oh, I might
have to tie you to the.
Wow, okay, let me see if I can move this over here at least. And then I'll talk to this side, right? Then I'll talk to this side more. Is that better then?
Yes.
And do we have, and somebody wants remote control of my screen?
I'm sorry.
Okay, okay.
It's probably harmless, but I think that's.
Yes, I think you have to say no. I would prefer you say no. So yes, the club that we never thought we would join, but I will tell you that after being in the club for, with knowledge, 5 years, but caregivers know what I'm saying. Once we look back, we've been in this club longer than 5 years. You know, in the beginning, I thought my mom was intentionally lying to me. You know, and now I recognize she was not intentionally lying to me at all. And the other habit she had was, she lives in Ohio and she's still alive. She lives in Ohio. She would put things in plastic bags from the grocery store and she would tie them up, double knot them, and then she would leave them around the house. And then when I would go to visit, she would say that she lost something. And I started noticing on my visits that these bags were they were like multiplying like bunnies. There were just bags everywhere. And then she would say, well, I can't find my glasses. We can't go out yet. So, you know, being the dutiful daughter, I would go around looking for her glasses.
Our Zoom people are saying.
They're feeling left out. It's gonna work for me to hold this. Mike, look at us. But can they see me now?
Yeah.
About the computer.
Oh, now I understand what you're saying. Wow, okay, so I do have to go back. Do you have a step stool, Kelly? Yeah, this will be, wow, this is very interesting. You can't have speakers shorter than 5 feet, 1.5 in the future.
I'm gonna come back over here because I turned your face off
Mhm.
on my computer, but I can only turn it back on from here. And I'm gonna stop sharing for just a moment. Thanks, everybody, for your patience. We're gonna figure it out. I'm
Yeah.
gonna pin you so you're the star.
And
Not,
here's
I'm
what
gonna
thinking
leave,
too.
okay?
Can we swing that around and then I could stand over there? How far does that swing?
Yeah.
Hey, how about that? Can everybody see me? Yeah. Now you see my Halloween costume? But, okay. Is that weird for you all in the room? Little? Sorry, no?
I don't know if they can see the slide.
But now, oh, because I'm not sharing. Yep.
No, that's good, Sonia.
I need about.
Yeah, yeah. We need all.
This.
I have an idea. Laura, keep talking. I'm gonna see if I can share from my.
Okay, okay. We're working on it, people who are Zoom.
I don't want to do that.
Okay, so where was I?
Just go ahead and.
Bunnies.
Oh,
Bags.
bunnies and bags, yeah. So she lost her glasses. And I would pick up a bag and I would say, could your glasses be in here?
Got it on full screen
Whoops.
Yeah.
from Zoom, right?
Right. Laura, I'm gonna have to move this just for a moment, so that I can.
We'll be back.
Share. You can keep
Talk
talking
amongst
if they can hear
yourselves.
you.
On the bottom right-hand corner, hit that little movie screen.
You sound like a man who knows what you're doing.
Third one over. Keep going, keep going. That one.
Oh,
Look at that one. Right now, click it, you got both. You
I'm
got
gonna
it.
move, so
And
it's
I'll
only
be
you.
here.
Yeah.
That okay, Zoom people? I'm gonna go back so I can see the chat.
Thank you, Kelly. Good job. Good job. Okay, so going back to my mom, I would visit her and she would have these plastic bags all over her house. She would lose her glasses and I would go look in all of the obvious places on her dresser in the bathroom and they wouldn't be there. And then I started noticing the bags. So I would pick up a bag and say, could they be in here? And she would say with a lot of confidence and surety, no, they're not in there. I know what's in there. And I believed her because she sounded so confident about that. So it took me a couple of years visiting to then start opening the bags. And what I found was just, yeah, a combination of old bills, old statements, sometimes a fork. You just never knew what you were going to get when you opened the bags. But I see some people nodding who have had similar experiences too. So that's why I said I didn't know I was in the club before I was in the club, but I actually was in the club a lot sooner. After I got in the club though, and I knew I was in the club, one of the things that I am grateful for the club for is that there are always people who are willing to help. And I find that a lot of times we've got such similar experiences. We feel crazy when we're trying to figure it out alone. But when we talk to other people, we know that they have similar experiences. And the person dressed like the Joker back there is Sonia Jury, and she actually wrote a book about this, and it helped me so much. to just understand the journey ahead of me. And I so appreciated that because I did not know that they made adult onesies. So that was a huge thing that I learned from her book. So I find that people are willing to help. And then I started thinking, how could I help? What could I give people in this group that I am a new member of or a relatively, newer member of? What could I give people? And I thought, you know what I'm really good at? Because of my PhD in communication and my specialty in listening, I am really good at establishing relationships with people. And I know that I have to do it differently now that my mom is in cognitive decline because I can't do what I've always done. And so that's why I'm here today talking about how can I communicate more meaningfully as a caregiver, the top 3 tips for communicating with those with cognitive impairment. I'm not sure where to, there we go. So those of you who are caregivers, and I gave you a survey, so you've already had time to think about this. If you want to look at your answer there, what's one question I could answer today for you? And I will try to weave it into my top 3 tips.
Early stages.
Thank you for that. So the beginning part of the journey. Do I have anything else that people want to throw out? And people on chat, feel free to put that in chat too. The white lies, yes. On the arguing? Yeah, the arguing because they're not accepting. Yeah, that, yeah, or they're always right. Yeah. Dealing with the questions. Okay.
Our chat, people are asking for how it is possible and the more.
Yeah. Yeah, well, we won't, so yes, I will, because I will cover them. I will try to weave them in, and if I haven't weaved them in, then at the end, I will definitely address them to the best of my ability for you. So tip number 1 looks the easiest, but it really is the hardest thing to do. And tip number 1 is release all expectations of how you think communication should be. Because believe it or not, we have been acculturated into understanding how we do communication in the United States. And I say in the United States because every culture has different communication codes. We know how to do communication here because we have been doing communication here for decades. And we've been doing communication with our loved ones for decades too. But now all of a sudden, it doesn't seem to work like it used to work before. And I want to see if you are holding on to any of these shoulds from the person that you're giving care to. They should say something back. Now, my mom is further on in her journey, so oftentimes she won't, oh, am I too close? Wow, that's scary when I looked at myself. Yeah, yeah, that's too much. Thank
All
you.
the ear doctor.
That's
Left ear.
good, that's good. But I started getting frustrated when my mom wouldn't respond back, but then I had to realize that she's not going to respond back. Because one of the things that happens with cognitive impairment is the brain starts deteriorating. And the brain begins at 100%, and at the end, it could end up to be 33%. I want you to think about that because what we know about the brain is there are a lot of bridges or synapses in the brain where one idea moves over to this side, which moves over to those sides. But if you think of all of those as bridges, we never know which bridge is going to collapse when. We do have a lot of evidence that nouns are the first thing to go, particularly proper nouns. So my mom doesn't know my name anymore. And then roles go. So she doesn't understand that I am her daughter. And then more recently, last November, I noticed for her that processes were going. So she told me her coffee pot was broken. And when I went to visit, I said, well, can you show me how to make coffee? And she couldn't do the process anymore, something she had done for decades and decades and decades. And so processes start to go as well. So there are things that we do know that the bridge collapses and you can't get over anymore. That's never going to come back. You know, I would love for my mom to call me Laura, her daughter, but I don't know that that will ever happen again. And I just have to accept that. So saying something back, another story on this, we have what's called a grand pad. And for those of you who are early in this journey, I'd highly recommend that you look into it. It's like an iPad for seniors. And only the people who are input into the contact list can call the senior then. You can do audio calls, you can do video calls. The grand pad also plays music. You can play games with other people who are in your contact list. It hosts a lot of things. So we got my mom a grand pad at the beginning of the pandemic, and she's never been a technologically sound person, but she was able to answer calls and make calls on the grand pad. More recently, I tried to call her. She's in a care center now. So I had the caregivers take her to in front of the grand pad, and they helped her answer the call when I called. It was a video call. And I could tell she didn't recognize me at all. She had absolutely no idea who this flat person on the screen was. I actually timed this. I talked for 8 minutes trying to get some response. She did not say one word in 8 minutes. And after 8 minutes, she wheeled her wheelchair out of the room. She just left me on the grand pad, right? And I just have to go, this is where she is now, right? Her routine outside of the grand pad and in the common area was more important to her than the person that she doesn't know to be her daughter named Laura. And I just have to accept that these things will happen. So sometimes they won't say something back, and then as the whatever disease it is progresses, they won't say things back. And one of the reasons that they don't also, and this kind of middle to end stage, it can take them up to 2 minutes to process a question we ask them. And as humans, one of the things that we do is we expect a response right away. And we don't give people the time and the space to respond. So we have to learn to ask one question and only one question. And I know our natural inclination is to, oh, she didn't understand the question, so now I'm going to ask it a different way, or I'm going to ask it differently. Don't do that. Don't do that. Just leave that question. And now you got to count a lot of alligators, right? 120 alligators to get to the 2 minutes. But I have been doing this with my mom when I'm with her live, and she will eventually respond. So that is nice, and mostly on topic too. So we just have to be incredibly patient. Respond on topic. They don't always respond on topic, and at different stages, it could be for different reasons. My mom's hearing was going, but she didn't say, I can't hear you or can't understand you. So louder.
Yeah.
So she would, oh, but then I'm closer. Oh, it's such a conundrum. So she would, I don't want to say pretend like she understood the question, because she understood the question to the best of her ability, and she would answer what she thought the question was. And it wasn't necessarily the question that I had asked. So I had to be very gentle and graceful with that as well. She necessarily wouldn't be what you'd consider truthful. about those plastic bags. Oh, I know what's in there, right? I know what's in there. And what I've read and a lot of the research points to is they understand that things are starting to go, so they are trying to cover things. They're not necessarily lying, although we call it lying, but they're really trying to still be who they've always known they've been. Be quick. They're not going to be quick. As I said, it can take up to 2 minutes. And they're not going to necessarily ask you questions anymore, because the ability to ask questions is one of those bridges that goes away as well. So they can't necessarily ask you questions anymore. And show any interest in your life. But that doesn't mean that we can't do things. Stories are one of the things that are universal, that kind of matches the speakers and the listeners' brains. And they've done lots of studies on this. They understand the story of a structure. So if you tell them stories, and when I say stories, for example, I just went to Yosemite. And so the last time I went to visit her, I took my pictures and I was telling her about everything we did in Yosemite, you know, so the story of Yosemite. And she didn't ask any questions about it, but I could tell that she was really interested, and she would nod her head and she enjoyed seeing the photos. So what are other solutions besides stories? This is going to be the most important thing, I think. If you can develop a mantra that works for you. This is one of my mantras that I use with my mom. And you'll see I use a lot of different mantras. And mantras are those things that we repeat to ourselves when we get into that place of frustration to remind us what the reality really is. It's her movie and she's the director. I need to follow her lead. I am just the actor in her movie now. So wherever she wants to go with the conversation, I go with her. Whatever she wants to do, I go with her. If she doesn't want to sit and look at me on the grand pad and she wants to leave, it's her movie. She can turn it off and I can just go away. So it's her movie. She's the director and I need to follow her lead.
Like saying the F word 3 times in a row.
Probably not a good idea, right? Because that suggests she knows what she's doing and she has control over it. But she no longer has control over it because those bridges literally have burned or collapsed. They're not. Not necessarily. Not necessarily, but you're gonna like tip number 3. You're gonna, so stick around for tip number 3. So tip number 2 is respond instead of react. And the difference being, of course, that responding is having the ability to think before we speak. And we have the ability to think before we speak. We don't always exercise it, but we have that ability. And we need to be grateful for having that ability. People who are in cognitive decline as they get further along only can react. And that's an automatic, instinctive, impulsive, and emotional response to a situation. So they don't have the ability to say, well, I'm angry here, but I'm not going to yell. I'm going to ask a question. That's gone. Those bridges are gone. So we have to accept that they can only react at a certain point to us. So they're reacting, and that's the movie that we're following. Now, if they're reacting in a violent or a frustrated way, it's generally because they don't feel safe or something hurts. And so we have to be those detectives to try to figure out why they may not feel safe or what might hurt with them. My mom broke her hip this summer, and because of her dementia, she doesn't feel that pain in her hip. And so she wanted to get up and walk with her walker as she always did, but she can't because that bridge about pain wasn't working anymore. Same there, or question? Yeah. Yeah.
Just let me know.
Yeah, so for the people who are on Zoom, somebody else in here had a mother who broke her hip. And she warned the staff that her mother would try to get up and walk because she didn't feel the pain. The staff, I guess, didn't believe her. Mom got up and proceeded to walk or try to walk. So there are just those bridges that burn, those bridges that collapse and go away. And what we can do as caretakers is really pay attention to what those bridges are. So we know those things and we can document those things. And then if they're in the care of someone else, like my mom is in a care center, you know, being able to tell them that, and then hopefully they're going to pay attention to it as well. So at a certain point, the people with cognitive decline only have the ability to react. So we have to take that into consideration. It's still their movie, and now we are playing improv, right? But that's our job, is to play improv actors. Now, oftentimes their reactions, again, are based in fear. They're afraid of something. So if you see them act out when one person enters the room, you know, it might be that person. If it happens repeatedly with that person, there's something about that person that they don't trust, they're afraid of. That person maybe reminds them of somebody in the past, or maybe that person did something awful to them now, you know, because we don't always know those things. And reacting almost always makes things worse. We have to remember that reacting almost always makes things worse, but that's not a rule that we can apply to the person with cognitive decline anymore, right? We have to figure out why they're uncomfortable or why they might be afraid. So why is caregiver reacting bad? There's a lot of research that talks about emotional contagion, and emotional contagion is real. And what that means is that emotions are contagious. So when you came in this room, hopefully I showed you that I was happy and I was grateful for you to be here. And you smiled at me and you probably felt a little bit better, right, about being here. That's because emotions are contagious. Now, I know as a caregiver, we can get really frustrated. We can get angry. We can get resentful. If we get to be those things when we're with the person we're giving care to, then they can take on our emotions, because emotional memory is the last thing to go. That is the last bridge that's burned. And that's an important thing for you to know. And I'm actually going ahead a little bit there. But emotions are contagious. So we have to make sure that when we're with them, we only have positive emotions. Emotional memory is the last to go, and they will remember how you made them feel. So if you get angry and lash out at them, their memory, the way we think of memory, they're not going to be thinking, oh, she got mad and lashed out at me. But the emotional memory is in a different part of the brain. And that emotional memory is going to react when I walk in the room again, right? Because they're now remembering me as somebody who gets angry and lashes out. So we have to really be careful to control our emotions. So how do we do that? How do we respond instead of react? Reacting is the only option our loved one has. So again, we can't have any expectations for them about what to do, but responding, we still have control over. So one of the things that you can do is plan your strategy before or in advance. I've got a word missing on that slide. I apologize. But I know my mom's facility well enough that I know if I'm going to get frustrated with her, I will say to her, Mom, I need to go talk to Louise. I need to go talk to the nurse, right? And I don't go talk to Louise. I go and walk around and I walk it off, right? So that is my strategy, is to go talk to the nurse. If I know that I am getting frustrated or I'm getting angry or I'm getting something that I don't want my mom to catch, I need to leave the room. That's the strategy that I have. You can also use a mantra if you have to stay there in the room. I can choose, but they can't. I can choose, but they can't. And that is a great mantra to use because it reminds you that they don't have control anymore like we have control. Now, tip number 3 is begin using nonverbal communication now. Because once they get to the end stages, the only thing that they will have primarily, either exclusively or primarily, is nonverbal communication. And nonverbal communication is a wonderful thing because there are so many different ways that you can implement it. My mom and I have never been touchers, which goes back to my grandmother. My grandmother, whenever we would go visit, she would say, oh, don't hug me. I think I have a cold, right? So we were not a real big physically affectionate family. So my mom and I never were either. So I found that a couple of things that my mom really appreciates is when I groom her, right? So I become the groomer or the caregiver. So if she's got something on her face, I'll wipe that off. Or if her sweater is askew, then I will put it on straight and button her. But just those touches and the care of grooming is a nonverbal that you can do that they very much appreciate. Because the science does tell us that they still want connection. All humans want connection until the day they die, right? But the connection has to be done differently. So nonverbals become really important. What else can you do? I love this one. It's a little bit hard to see, but the two people at the table are high-fiving. And they've actually done lots of research on this too. And everybody in the American culture knows what the high five means. We see it all the time in sports games. We see it with kids. We do it with kids, but we don't do it as we grow up quite so much. So I've reinstated the high five with mom. So when mom does something really small, right? Maybe she'll put her shoe on herself. It's like, Mom, right? And what happens there is you've got the physical touch, but it also creates those feel-good hormones that we have, or feel-good chemicals, I should say. And so she's feeling good about the high five. And so implement as many high fives as you can. As a matter of fact, I do this in her facility with as many residents as I can. Wow, you ate all of your beans. Good job. And they know exactly what to do. They'll raise their hand and high five me back. Massage is a nice thing for some people. So my mom's feet would hurt when she was in the previous facility. So I would put her feet up and I would just give her foot rubs. Or she's got some rheumatoid arthritis. So I would just get some lotion and I would rub her hands. So just that kind of touch makes them feel really good. Again, they're probably not going to talk to us, but you can tell that it's really soothing them and making them feel better. And then holding hands is a really fun one too. When I last visited my mom, we were in the dining hall and they don't have assigned seats. So I actually sat next to a woman who couldn't feed herself. So I thought, well, I'm here. Why don't I do it? Right. So I was feeding her. And my mom actually smiled at me and said, thank you. I couldn't believe she did that, but she said, thank you for helping, because she recognized that I was helping this woman. And my mom had gotten finished with her meal and she wasn't really talking. And she was just looking around. So I slid my hand under the table and I held her hand and squeezed it. And her reaction was so funny because at first she looked around and I could tell she didn't know what it was. But then she looked at me and I smiled at her and kind of looked down and she recognized that I was holding her hand. You know, so just little gestures like that mean the world. So if you start them now at the beginning part of the journey, that's something that's going to continue on. But you can do these at any part of the journey that you're in. So I'm going to come back to these questions that I had. Let me double check my time here. Of course. 2:36, so I've got time for them, which is good. So the 3 tips I gave you that I gave you today: release all expectations of how you think communication should be, because it will be totally different and we can't expect it to be the same. Respond instead of react. Hard to do, that takes a lot of emotional control. We still have the ability to learn how to do that and to exercise it, which is terrific. And then begin using the nonverbals now. Now, what I did with the survey that you have in front of you is I was clever, and you can see on the first page, I didn't put everything down there. So if you want to fold this over, I have those 3 tips for you there, and you can just tear those off and then give me the survey. And that would be helpful for me. Now I want to go to some of the questions, and I deliberately made today short so I could ask questions, because I know that this cognitive journey is individualized, right? There are some things that we can look at thematically and say, yes, this will probably happen because if your loved one has dementia, 70% of people have the same kind of dementia, which means that the left side of their brain goes first, right? That's where the bridges are collapsing, the logical side, but the right side is not. So the right side is where the emotions are, which is why the nonverbals come into play, and the smiling, and anything that you cannot do nonverbally. So I want to go back to the lying, right? The white lies, because I heard that in a few different ways in questions in the beginning. And white lies frustrate us more than they frustrate them. Again, I don't believe they really know they're lying. They might know they're trying to cover something up, but I don't think it's with the intentional, they're not trying to intentionally hurt us, right? Or deceive us. They just don't want to become the person they fear they're becoming, which is very different motivation. So in the beginning, oftentimes what I would do is, instead of arguing with them or trying to prove I was right, because I knew I was right, just like you know you're right, right? That's where I think you have to get created, and you would have to ask them, what would a reasonable person do in this situation? And engage them more in talk so they can kind of talk it through for themselves. And then as the disease progresses, I have a friend here, Ellen, can I share? Yeah, so both of her parents were in a care center together, and her mother passed away and her father still was alive with Alzheimer's, advanced dementia. And he didn't, even though he was with her when she died, he didn't remember. And so he would ask for her. And at first they would tell him that she had passed away, but he would then have that visceral reaction every time, which is really cruel when you think about it, right? We don't want to put them through any more pain. So what they started saying is, oh, she's down the hall, right? Or she went to the cafeteria to get something to eat, or she's in the other room. And that would work, because then he would quit asking about her, right? And so I think what's interesting in the journey is the most kind thing we can do is to begin telling those white lies too, right? So I think it is a circle thing. So I'm not saying that all lying is bad. We have to understand, yeah, the context in which the lying is taking place. Yes, therapeutic fibs. I like that term. Thank you. Yeah. Yeah. And there's another term too that's interesting to me. It's called confabulation. Is that right? What is it? Confabulation. And this is an interesting thing because they get some of the facts right, but then they insert other facts. And again, I think it's because they're taking lots of different bridges because some of them have collapsed. So they're filling in the parts of the story, but they don't recognize that they're filling in parts of the story. So that's why at some stage, you're going to see them. It's like, well, they know this, but they don't know that. And that's really confusing. But that's what's happening is the confabulation. He will he will remember how you make him feel. So every time I go visit my mom, I feel like I'm Ellen on the Ellen show because she sees my face and she's like, oh, and then it goes away, right? And then she's back to her routine there. But she recognizes that I am a safe person. And that's all I can give her right now is knowing that she is with somebody who's safe. And so when I take her out for a walk through the community, she's not afraid to go with me because she knows I'm safe. Sorry.
Well,
I just want to come hug you because you're crying. I'm sorry. So do I want to take her home or she feels like she's home with me? Yeah, I'm not sure I'm going to use the term home, but I could use home, right? Because home is what makes us feel safe and secure. So I do feel like she feels like she's at home when she's with me. Yeah, yeah, that's a beautiful way to say that. Thank you. It's hard. I know, I get it. I get it. Other questions from chat people, other questions from people in here. Yes, yes, I would say that that is absolutely true. And contact comfort doesn't just have to come from us. If you're lucky enough, well, first of all, if you're a caregiver at home, that's going to be very different. And I've not ever had that journey myself at home because I live in a different state that my mom does. But if you are in a facility that that prioritizes the care comfort. And I have to be careful with how I say this because she was in a facility that was absolutely awful. And the last thing you could get from any of the staff was care, right? They did the physical care, but they never paid attention to the emotional care. And so when you say care contact, I'm thinking more in terms of comfort. Yeah, of the emotional contact. So my mom has befriended, and again, we use our words for this. If they had words, they would be very different. But she's befriended two people at her center where one of them, Phyllis, talks incessantly. And at first, when you listen to Phyllis, you're like, wow, she's a smart woman. She knows what she's talking about. But then things start weaving in and you're like, that's not making sense, right? But Phyllis likes to talk. And my mom has always historically been really good at being the fly on the wall. So she's a great listener. So she will just nod and the two of them get along so well. And then the third person in the group is named Carol. And this is just the sweetest thing. And if I could get permission to get a photo of this, I would, because my mom and Carol will sit at a table and they're square tables and they will lean over and they will hold each other's hands and just grin at each other. And for an excessive period of time. And that's the way that they're connecting. And I recognize that that's the way they're connecting through the physical contact. So I just stay out of it at that point. You know, I just wait for them to let go of hands because I know that she is feeling cared for and connected at that point in time. That,
I was thinking when that contact come from like the bus.
oh, yes, yeah. Yes, very similar, I think, very similar, because we as humans, we have that desire to be connected, you know, and now at this point in our lives, right, we know how we want to be connected with people. So that's why we've pared down our friend group and we go, well, I don't want to go out with them because she talks too much, or, you know, but you choose to go out to the people that you feel closest to because you feel connected to them. And so people with cognitive decline still want to feel connected, and their connection as it progresses primarily becomes nonverbal. Other questions? Mm. Yeah. And that becomes much more challenging. I would say the best advice that I could have in that situation is just tell a story, right? Don't expect them to respond back to you. Don't necessarily expect them to remember you, but if you can tell a story of you and them from the past, that might tweak something. But do not expect it to be what we would say is a regular telephone conversation. It's more, I don't want to say we're performing, because we're not performing. I think we're playing a really important role in helping them feel safe and helping them feel connected. So it's not like we're acting. One of the things that I say is, you know, they don't, at a certain point, they don't have a past, they don't have a future. All they have is a present. So if my sole responsibility is to help her smile in the present or help her feel content in the present, then I have done my job. We have connected. It is good. It is good. Sometimes I just go for an hour and we'll sit and hold hands and watch cartoons and never say anything else. She never used to watch cartoons. Now she thinks they're hysterical. So I'll just hold her hand and we'll watch cartoons. Question?
Telephone conversation. Which can help too. Positive tone.
Yeah, definitely tone of voice. And Bill was a fellow communication professor with me at Rockhurst University. So I very much appreciate that he is here, but he's absolutely right, the tone of voice. And also speaking more slowly, because with the phone, you don't have the ability to have those nonverbals. And so really speaking slowly, so slow that it drives you crazy almost, but that helps them understand it. Any other questions from the chat?
Thing that might be. Filter. How would I know so that might move?
I will tell you what I did, which seemed to work really well. I knew that my mom had a great respect for authority and for doctors and nurses. And even though I'm a doctor, she doesn't have great respect for that because I was still her daughter at this point. So I said to her, Mom, I am new with all of this as well. I don't know what we're supposed to do, but I have an idea. Why don't we call a nurse in, or we can call in, it's called, what's it called? There's a geriatric care specialist. I found a certified geriatric care specialist who came into the house and she did a 2-hour evaluation. So she did a physical evaluation and a cognitive evaluation, and then she wrote up a report. And before she came, I said to my mom, here's what I'm thinking we should do. I think that we should talk to the people who really know about this stuff, and geriatric care specialists or nurses or doctors who know about this stuff. Why don't we have them come in and test you, and then whatever they say is best, we should do what they tell us because they're the smartest people in this way. And she agreed to that. And so when we got the report back, of course, it had suggested an assisted living facility. And so it was a hard conversation, right? Because it was resigned, but we had also agreed ahead of time that we would respect the authority. So if your parent has a high respect for authority, that might be one way to go with it. Yeah. So Sonia said that she used her husband a lot. Her husband would say things because her mom respected males more than he respected females. And so she would be more apt to do what he said as opposed to what Sonia said.
Receiving the myelin. You can do that, we'll make sure you do that before you leave. Commercial. And yeah, those folks.
Yeah.
They are very.
A question there? Yep, it looks like there's a question there.
I meant to pay that twice. So while she's. I. You needed. Now she's changing the.
Yeah, she's reacting emotionally to what's going on. So and because you're sisters, you probably have an emotional conflict that you've had for decades and decades and decades. So it sounds like she might be reacting out of that emotional conflict that you have. So your best bet is just to be calm and to agree with everything she says. Drive her crazy, depending on where she is in the journey, but just agree with everything she says. Remember the director quote, like, you're just in her movie now, she's the director, go with it. Yeah, just go with it. It will make your life so much easier. Yeah.
good thing.
Yeah.
So it's like how
have those conversations, right? About, so, you know, something might happen to me. And if something happens to me, I would hate to think that nobody knew how to get into your bank account. Can you think of somebody else that you trust that we should maybe give the responsibility to or bring in with us? So I think having those conversations of people that they trust, because I think at some level they are beginning to understand that they can't do it. They don't want to admit it. But if you, you know, you've got those long-term issues, it might be a third person, right? So it might be a cousin. My mom, what I've used, he's my first cousin and he's the oldest of all of my grandmother's grandchildren. But for some, you know, mom loves Gary, right? Mom loves Gary. And so Gary is the executive of her will. And Gary has access to just about everything. And Gary's going to sell her home. And so we just gave everything to Gary, and Gary was nice enough to take it on. Yeah. Yeah.
So.
And there's that gray area in between,
so
right?
I'm
Yeah.
thing too, in fact, daughter to me.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, hey, you know,
What does she need to do?
slow down.
Oh,
Tell them.
yeah. Oh, that's a tough one. Yeah, when the whole family is kind of complicit in that.
Well, they're.
Yeah. Are you the cousin?
No, I'm the.
Oh,
better
okay.
half, the other.
Okay. Okay.
But,
You're the
he's
other half
better.
then. Yeah.
You know.
She your wife or, oh, yeah.
Oh, there's nothing I can do now. Sure, because, you know, I turned it over to the daughter and I said to both of them, I said, you know. What happens to me?
Yeah.
You're gonna have to pay for all this.
Yeah. Well, they won't, right, necessarily. So what I have resigned myself to with my mom's money is it's either going to go to her care facility because that cost a lot per month, or it's going to go to the hospital because when she falls and breaks her hip, and then she fell again after that, trying to do what your mom did too, you know, the bills are like $16,000. Yeah. And so it goes to one of those two, and I am now working with an elder care attorney to have a trust, which I should have done 5 years ago, but I didn't understand what a trust was or how it would protect a little bit of the money. So I'm doing that now, but you're right, there is not a lot that we can do. The money will go away. The money just gets spent.
Exactly, but I can't convince her that. $10 a day on Amazon, spend out. Every day, and it's well over $27.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I can't solve everything. Right? Yeah, I mean, there are just some things, but we can create more meaningful connections with them. Tanya, you're doing this. Yeah. Yeah, that, I would say not necessarily, right? What you can do, I read about, and I thought this was a really good idea, is find somebody else to blame. Okay, so in this case, it's, okay, you don't want me to be this person anymore. Let's sit down and write a list of ideas of who you want. And then help her start writing the letter that asks this person to do that for her. And she probably will not get that far along in the process. Yeah.
We can't hear any of the questions.
Yeah. I like that. She said, let's let the world take a couple of turns on that. And so redirecting in the moment. Yeah, yeah, it could be any of those. I'm still open for questions, but I do want to let you know. Oh, wait, maybe I'm holding it the wrong way. I do not know why it's not going anymore. But hopefully you put the link. Okay, yeah. That is perfect because I'm actually creating a course for caregivers. And the first course will be the most basic course, of course. And that will be people, primarily at the middle to the, or excuse me, the beginning to the middle stages. And then eventually I'd like to do a more advanced course as well. But if you filled out the survey and gave me your email on the backside, then I will go ahead and sign you up for the email, so you will be the first to know when that course is available. People who are online, you actually have a link that Kelly put into the chat to go to what the people here are filling out live. And if you go there, and everybody here who gives me their email, I'll make sure you get this document. It's a 4-page document of the 2 things that you can do right now that are game changers. And one of them is really changing the way we think about how we're going to interact with our loved ones. So I'm not sure what the time is. Oh, I'm over now. But I am happy to stay here and answer some questions. I appreciate you coming. And please don't forget to give me your surveys. Thank you. Yeah, this will be, this was video recorded and it's going to go on the ADR website.
Yeah, so the video will be on YouTube. Tomorrow. PowerPoint and. She said no, but up to you, Laura.
Yeah, nope, you sure can. And there's my last slide there, right? The email list. So if you want to get on my email list, there is my email, and the email is also at the bottom of the part of the document that you are keeping. So you can get on the email list that way. Okay?
I can make a PDF.
Yeah.
And we'll make sure.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Did you learn something? Good. That's what's most important to me.
Yeah.